quorum call?
We are not.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this year, 2026, is the 50th anniversary of the Hyde Amendment. Now, that may not mean a lot to a lot of people, but 50 years ago, the United States Senate, the United States House, and the President of the United States came to a compromise agreement over the issue of abortion. It was a long, drawn-out process, and at the end of that long, drawn-out debate, they came to a compromise agreement that Americans would not have to pay for elective abortions. It didn't outlaw abortion in America, but it said we have disagreements on abortion as Americans, but at a minimum, we should agree American tax dollars should not pay for the taking of human life. That health care is about protecting life, not taking life. That in a controversial issue like abortion, at least we should all agree we don't use tax dollars to pay for abortion. That was 50 years ago this year. It's amazing to think about how many things have changed in American attitudes in 50 years. But what hasn't changed is we still haven't come to an agreement about abortion. We still haven't been able to resolve that issue. Now, science has resolved that issue, but we in American values and culture, we have not. Science would say that a child's life begins at conception. That's the moment that the DNA is different than the mom's DNA. Every single cell in the mom's body has the same DNA except for those cells. Those cells are different. They have a unique DNA in the world because that's a different person that's there. The cells are dividing and growing. There's no difference between a child in the womb and a child outside the womb other than time. That's a separate child. Science has settled that issue, but culturally, we haven't been able to settle this issue. Are some children valuable and are some children disposable? Our culture still believes there are some children that are disposable. I don't. I think every child is valuable. Whether you're a child born in a wealthy household or in poverty, that child has opportunity in America if they're allowed to live. It's this ongoing dialogue that we have as a country. Do we value the most vulnerable in our society? It's a conversation that's been going on now 5 decades. And next week, there'll be tens of thousands, probably actually hundreds of thousands, of students and adults that will all come to Washington, D.C. And I'm sure, as it always is on that January day, it will be cold outside, and they will walk down the mall and gather for a rally that's simply called a March for Life. They'll talk about the beauty of life. They'll talk about the value of every child. There'll be testimonies of people that their family has personally experienced abortion. There'll be testimonies of folks that they directly have experienced the pain of abortion. There'll be folks that'll stand up as physicians and talk about the medical issues, but ultimately there'll be conversations about every single child being valuable and beautiful. There'll be people in the crowd that were born in poverty and people in the crowd that were born in wealth, just like every other child in America that's in the womb. Except for those folks that will be at the rally, we'll be celebrating the fact that they were born, number one, and that they had an opportunity to be able to speak out for the next generation of people that so much desires to be born and to have the same opportunities all of us in this room have to grow, to learn, to love. That's all that child wants. And they have the opportunity to be able to have that. As I mentioned, 50 years ago, the Hyde Amendment was put in place. Every single part of our healthcare operation with federal dollars is all covered by the Hyde Amendment, whether it be Department of Defense, healthcare, whether it be Veterans Administration, whether it be Indian healthcare services, whether it be CHIP services for children. All of those are covered by Hyde protections with this basic compromise agreement that we will not fund abortions with American taxpayer dollars. Well, except for one area, and that's actually Obamacare. When the Affordable Care Act was passed, there was an attempt to be able to have the Hyde Amendment actually included in that. That was actually put in the House of Representatives when they sent it over to the Senate to say, no, let's include the Hyde Amendment in this like we do every other part of our health care agreement. When it came to this body, though, my Democratic colleagues stripped that out, and they included in a different section saying, no, we're actually going to create a workaround around the Hyde Amendment so that we can quietly fund elective abortion for the first time with federal tax dollars. That workaround still exists today. The original agreement in the conversation was that every state would allow some options that would have elective abortions for your health care coverage and some options that you could choose without that. Except now that there's 12, maybe 13 states working that don't allow any option of the Affordable Care Act of Obamacare to be in their state that doesn't also require abortion coverage. So even people that are morally opposed to abortion and the taking of human life, they don't have an option to buy coverage in their state for health care without having abortion coverage built into it. Now the issue became, well, there'll be some kind of set-aside dollars that'll be separate, that you'll have a separate premium that you'll have to pay, and that separate premium will pay for the abortion coverage, except the insurance companies can't actually show where that separate premium is. In fact, after the law passed that required a separate payment for abortion coverage there, so there would be a type of Hyde is what they called it, the Obama administration immediately came out and said, actually the word separate actually means together. I'm not making this up. And so you now have your premiums together, but it's defined as being separate. Only in government can you define separate as meaning together. So we still have this one form of health care in America that violates this 50-year-old compromise. We don't use taxpayer dollars and compel Americans who actually value children to pay for the taking of life of a child. We're still working on that. Ironically enough, there's still an ongoing debate on the Affordable Care Act on Obamacare, still raging in this body even this week. And much of it circles around, is this going to be about health care, or is this going to be about the taking of human life? I have no issue if we're working on health care policy. I have a big issue if we're working on taking the life of an innocent child. There's also an ongoing debate that's happening right now over chemical abortions. Mifepristone, if you want to use the medical term, and there's several generics that are out there as well. This is an abortion drug that is literally now mailed to you without seeing a physician. Now, that didn't used to be so. It is a prescription drug. It's not an over-the-counter drug, and it's a prescription drug for a reason, because it has very, very serious side effects. But this prescription drug, under COVID time period, the Biden administration said, you know, there's a COVID crisis. People can't get in to see their doctor right now, so we'll allow them just to call in, and there'll just be this medicine mailed to them. And so for the first time, suddenly Mifepristone, that actually causes an abortion for a woman, that drug is now being mailed without ever seeing a doctor. Now, some folks say, well, that's no big deal. It's used all the time, so it must be completely safe. In fact, my favorite term that I hear, and I hear it even from some folks in this body, is Mifepristone is as safe as Tylenol. I've heard that so many times. It's as safe as Tylenol, it's as safe as Tylenol, it's as safe as Tylenol. Well, let me start with some basics. When you take a Tylenol, it doesn't take a child's life. So Mifepristone, by design on the label, takes the life of a child. So let's just start there. The second issue, though, is also interesting. If you follow the label instructions for Mifepristone and take it exactly as it is labeled, and if you take a Tylenol and take that exactly as it's labeled, if you take Mifepristone, though, you are 8,000 times more likely to end up in the hospital than taking a Tylenol. Let me run that past you again. For all the folks that say it's as safe as Tylenol, Mifepristone, according to the stats that we have that are public, you are 8,000 times more likely to end up in the hospital taking Mifepristone than you are taking a Tylenol. Stop saying it's as safe as Tylenol. The facts do not bear that out. It's not. Mifepristone also has a strong likelihood and a side effect of causing infertility among women that have, the baby has a different blood type than the mom, and if the combination's not correct, the mom then suffers from infertility the rest of her life. Now, if you go see a doctor, they can tell you that. But if you just get it in the mail, you have no idea. Or how about this issue? If you have an ectopic pregnancy, which you don't know unless you have an ultrasound, taking Mifepristone can not only kill the baby, but could also kill the mom. This is a big issue. The Biden administration became flippant about this chemical abortion drug because the Biden administration was focused on having more abortions in America. They weren't just pro-choice, they were pro-abortion, trying to increase the number of abortions in America. But to do that, they did not take into account the health and life of the moms because they were so eager to increase the number of abortions. Even in my state, we've made a decision based on the Dobbs decision from the Supreme Court that's now each state can make their own decisions about what they're going to do about this issue of life. After decades under Roe v. Wade, the court has now said this is up to every state. So in my state, you would say this is a settled issue, except for doctors out of state. Now we're mailing in abortion pills into women in my state, intentionally going around our state laws. Intentionally. This morning, the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, chaired by my friend Dr. Bill Cassidy, they held a hearing talking about Mifepristone this morning. One of the witnesses was the Attorney General from Louisiana, talking about the number of women who have experienced coercive abortions where a parent or a boyfriend or some other loved one compelled them to be able to take these chemical abortion drugs against their will, compelled them to do that, or slipped it into their food or into a drink to be able to sneak it into their system, literally taking the life of that child. You know how they can do that? Because you don't have to see a doctor to get access to these drugs. They can just be mailed to you as if they're a Tylenol when they are not. We have to have an ongoing conversation here. Decades into this dialogue about the value of children, we're still talking about this issue. Are children valuable? Let's keep talking about it. Because at some point as a country, we have to resolve this most simple, scientific, ethical decision. Are some children valuable and some children are disposable? Or is each child valuable? I'm going to stand with the marchers that are coming in next week to joyfully celebrate the beauty of every child. Yesterday, I was emailed a photo of a longtime friend of mine who she just had her first child. It's been a long process for she and her husband. But I got a beautiful picture of baby Benjamin yesterday. And he's adorable. I know you're not supposed to say that about a boy, but he's adorable. And we're excited to see him. Last year, there were 1 million abortions ever done in America. 1 million. We'll never see their face. Those children either were thrown away in the trash or ended up in a toilet after a chemical abortion. What's the difference between those two children? Not a thing. Not a thing. All children are valuable. All of them. And I pray for the day when all of them have an opportunity to live and to experience this glorious nation that we get to experience the freedom of every day. So thanks to the marchers who will speak out next week for life, and for all of those around the country that continue to look at the science and continue to look in the face of a child and say, you're beautiful. I yield the floor.